Hi, everyone. My name is Shania Siron. I'm one of the Career and Fellowship Advisors for the Center for Life Beyond Read, and today we're going to do a Q&A session about the Fulbright.
My name is Jolon. I graduated in 2018 with a bachelor's in anthropology and have since been working and volunteering abroad in different countries.
Jolon, can you tell me how many hours per week do you think you spent drafting your internal and then external application?
Right. So I started drafting my internal application in the August before the deadline during the summer. And I would say I spent about 4 to 5 hours per week on average throughout August. When school started, I spent much less, about 1 to 2 hours per week for the internal application. And then the external application afterwards, I also spent about 1 to 2 hours per week.
Yeah, I think that's healthy. Definitely being able to manage your time and try and get the majority of that application done during the summer is what we encourage people to do.
Yeah.
Just because you'll find that you get to the school year and there is no more time for you to commit to like too much of the application at that point.
Right. Well, actually, I applied the summer after my senior year. So I applied in that grace period after, I don't know if that still applies for
Yeah,
current
it
students,
is.
but I applied in that year after, after I graduated.
Cool.
So I had a lot of time, but I did allocate, or I did work on the essays and the application for the most part in the summer. Honestly, mostly to help out the Center for Life Beyond Read staff and my academic advisor, who were the main folks I was engaging in terms of editing and
Yeah,
shaping the application.
yeah. Okay. And so like follow-up question, what was your process for selecting the country and the type of award that you chose?
Right. So I did my thesis based off research interest in the region. I
Mhm.
did my thesis on basically an old American military base in the Panama Canal region. And because I was interested broadly in studying US imperialism
Mhm.
and the legacy of US militarism, um, especially in South America, Central America to be exact. Um, so I was interested in the region, and I wanted to explore sort of that legacy also in Colombia to the degree I could, while
Right,
also being a teacher, because
right.
I taught English, of course, almost full time in Colombia under the Fulbright. Um, and on a practical level, there were only 2 spots for English teaching in Panama. The Fulbright program in Panama just wasn't very robust or developed yet,
Mhm.
whereas there were many more spots in Colombia. And I wanted a sense of camaraderie with other Fulbrighters. So I ended up applying to the Colombia Fulbright.
Do you feel like while you were there in Colombia, you got the chance to do some of that exploration you were hoping to do, like when you weren't teaching? Was there time?
There was time, yeah.
Cool.
Colombia has a lot of holidays, so which was very nice. And so I took advantage of that time with other Fulbrighters who lived in the same city
Mhm.
as I did, and we traveled a bit. Not as much as I would have liked. I ended up trying to save some money so that I could travel quite a bit at the end
Yeah.
of my Fulbright experience. And then, of course, that would have been March 2020, and we were
Yeah.
forced to go home with the pandemic.
Mhm.
Um, so not as much as I would have liked to, but certainly a bit. The
Good. Yeah.
weekends and other holidays.
Yeah. I think that's a question that comes up for me with from students is like, like what are you doing when you're not teaching? Or like, what is the plan on the days you're not teaching? And obviously every country and every award is very different, but yeah, to your point, the expectation is that you make friends, you meet other people through the program, that your time is your own. Um, so that's good to hear. And then you already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but who all did you work with, talk to, get feedback from when you were drafting your applications?
Yeah, so I mostly talked with Center for Life Beyond Read staff.
Mhm.
at the time, and my academic advisor, who was different from my thesis advisor.
Sure.
So I drafted my essays. I ended up asking my academic advisor to look them over after I had a good version.
Mhm.
Then I asked the Center for Life Beyond Read staff, actually multiple staff members, if they had the time to look it over. Again, this was like late August, so before the sort of
Yeah, that's
the
nice.
rush of the semester started, which I highly recommend because everyone had lots of time to give lengthy comments,
Yeah.
um, or hopefully they did.
Mhm.
Uh, and honestly, I didn't really reach out too much beyond that because I really felt that my academic advisor in the Center for Life Beyond Read had the best sense of what the uh, the essays should reflect in
Mhm.
me and my academic work and my academic interest and also my experience teaching. Um, so I didn't ask friends or family or other other contacts
Sure.
just because I really had the sense that the Center for Life Beyond Read staff especially had the best sense of exactly what would make me the strongest candidate.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it depends on like, your level of comfort with the application process. Like I think people, if you haven't really applied to fellowships before and you're still very like uncomfortable with writing about yourself, which is a totally different writing style.
Yeah, sure.
It helps to get feedback from a lot of people as you're trying to like find your voice in like your personal statements and your statement of grant purpose. But yeah, if you've already
Mhm.
developed that comfort, um, then it's kind of like a sliding scale of like how many people you feel like you need to reach out to.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Finding that that sense of self is difficult, is really difficult.
Yeah.
I think I developed that and like developed what I kind of figured out what I wanted to say eventually in the
Mhm.
essays in conversation more so than particular edits, like
Yeah.
with friends, for example, or colleagues. If I had a conversation about this essay I'm writing, I'm trying to figure out what it is that's driving me to what do I like about teaching. That conversation over lunch with a friend or a colleague help, I think, in that sense a lot.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's perfect too, because you also you're having to actually like synthesize like the why. Um, and Fulbright does do interviews, not every country, but some countries. So you do have to like potentially, prepare to have to talk about that. So I think that is a great practice.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so my fourth question, what were some of the greatest challenges of competing for this award? And that can include like time management or doing the campus interviews or just like conceptualizing like your essays.
Yeah, I would say figuring out the organization and the essays was the most difficult thing.
Mhm.
I had, for example, for each essay, I had to write 2 essays, and for each essay, I had about 12 drafts
Ooh.
that were, not just cosmetic edits every time. It was serious drafts every single time. So I really changed my essay multiple
Mhm.
times, both essays multiple times and pretty drastically. And so that requires a lot of time. And so, as you say, I think one of the most important things, time management, which is why, again, I recommend doing the majority of the essay writing and editing in the summer.
Mhm.
Um, I think one thing I didn't realize until kind of too far along, not too far along, but quite far along in the essay writing process was how important it would be for my application. And I was applying to teach English in Colombia, how important it would be for my application to highlight and to recognize and then highlight the experience I have teaching.
Right.
One of the most important things that I heard once I was in Colombia and discussing it with other Fulbrighters, our applications, was uh, highlighting experience. Everyone was talking about their experience teaching, but their experience, yeah, with Spanish, with the language, with in lots of different teaching contexts. So definitely recognizing that experience. It can be difficult, I think, to recognize what teaching experience you do have. When I was writing the essays, for example, I thought, what teaching experience do I have? I was a tutor at the Dojo, which is kind of teaching, but I put it in. Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
teaching. I
Yeah.
was a sort of informal English teacher at a organization called VOS in Portland.
Mhm.
I was teaching English to majority migrant population, but also other folks.
Mhm.
Uh, and I didn't really even think about that until September. And then I thought, oh my gosh, yes, of course, I have to put that in. So I put that in, and that absolutely, I think, helps just recognize your experience. And just the last thing I would say is the interview. That was also very difficult for me. I was very nervous because I knew that the Fulbright Columbia folks were interviewing about 200 people over the course
Mhm.
of like 4 days, and I only had 20 minutes in my
Oh,
interview. And I had
tell us
to,
about
since
that.
the interview was in Spanish. Yeah, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. Um, and so making yourself stand out, but also not too much, I think
Mhm.
is a skill to develop, practice answering questions, and in perhaps in the case of South American countries, the Spanish or the other language.
Yep. Mhm. Um, yeah, I think you mentioned two things there that really like stuck with me. I mean, the need to like assess all the like actually go back and reflect on like the things, what have you done, what in your work experience have you done, because I think sometimes that's a good point where like you may have a lot of like small and big experiences, and unless you're keeping like a diligent list of everything you're doing during your time at Reed, it is very easy to kind of forget. And so that is, yeah, a one thing that I took away from that was like, okay, like folks need to remember to like sit down one day and like actually like go through all the different versions of your resume and all the things you have and make sure you have a full picture of your work experience so you can pick and choose what is relevant to include in those essays. And then also you mentioned just like, you know, being confident in talking about yourself. I think a lot of students sometimes feel that they are bragging,
Mm,
you know, but like by like speaking to your teaching experience that you definitely have and should feel confident in, that like it's actually coming off as braggy and that folks will try and like downplay
mhm.
what they've got out of that teaching experience and the importance it has. So I think especially, and then having to write that in an essay and then also interview and talk even more about your experience. It's, you know, feeling confident that like, no, you earned that experience. It's totally valid to be excited about the fact that you have these skills.
Right, right, absolutely. If you downplay your experience or your skill in something,
Mhm.
then the folks reading your application are going to wonder, does this person actually have that experience? You
Right.
know, if you really just say, I have that experience, I did this thing, I have this experience,
Hmm.
much better than being too humble,
Right.
right?
I
On those
agree.
essays, at least.
Yeah. Okay, so you kind of already mentioned this too. So what skills of yours do you feel helped make your application strong and later become a successful applicant?
Sure. Yeah, I think um, one thing I really love doing is editing. I think most Reed students probably share in that joy.
Okay.
Well, hopefully, um, maybe less so some STEM folks, but that's okay. You can do it too. So I had, like I said, I had lots of drafts of the essays, and so
Mhm.
reaching out to people is not, luckily, is not a problem for me. So I reached out to, again, several Center for Life Beyond Read staff and my academic advisor. I believe as well one other anthropology professor
Mhm.
in the end, just to get lots of different eyes on my essays and my application. Um, I think by far the thing that helped my application the most was my teaching experience. Um, I ended up when I was in Colombia, I met actually one of my roommates, because I rented sort of a suite with a couple other Fulbrighters that were
Uh-huh.
living in the same city as I was. Um, I was talking with this roommate about our experience teaching before Fulbright, and sort of what we said on the application. And she had been a Teach for America employee, or she had done Teach for America for 2 years.
Mhm.
And I believe had very little exposure to language or the country or Colombia, which to me kind of went to show that really that experience,
Right.
although you're also learning quite a bit there, and certainly I learned a lot about teaching there,
Mhm.
really having that experience and showing it was something that I think really propelled my application um, forward in the process.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I would say is just for the interview, I think everyone's nervous and double, questions what they're saying during an interview.
Right. Was yours over the
Trying to
phone?
review. Sorry, what?
Sorry, was it over the phone?
It was
Okay.
over Google Hangouts, I believe. So no, it was a
Oh,
video.
okay. It was a
It
video
was,
interview.
it was a video interview, and I was actually at the time I was in Mexico in a hostel that had very, very sketchy Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It would just drop out sometimes, and so I was like just as much nervous that the Wi-Fi would cut out as I was for just my presentation. But yeah, if you can remain calm and confident in the interview, sort of you don't have to know what you're going to say, just kind of know yourself
Mhm.
to the degree possible. I did have a tough question, and I think you should expect tough questions for the interview.
Mhm.
Um, my understanding is that sort of for every candidate, they ask one of several tough questions. And so my tough question, according to the Fulbright folks, was assume, let's say you're in class, you're teaching a lesson on grammar, you're using a song, an American song, to explain some grammar topic or to practice something. And this is actually something I ended up doing. I ended up using a song. But let's say you are showing a song, and in the song is the N-word, and a student asks, "What is that, and can I use it?" Or some students already know the N-word, and they will say, "Can I use it?
Interesting.
What's the big problem?" Hmm?
That's a wild question.
It's a bit it's a bit tough for an interview, but they only have 20 minutes, and so they really want to
Yeah.
know what would you do. You need to
Yeah.
have some sense of what you do. And so I answered the question honestly, because how do you prepare for that? You can't really prepare for that. There's
Hmm.
also questions along the lines of, if a student has a crisis in the room, what would you do? Stuff like that.
Right.
Um, but yeah, just be calm and confident, answer it from a place of your own knowledge and empathy, and I think the interview should go well.
Yeah. And I think, geez, I'm still just on that question. Two things. Um, you mentioned something about really enjoying the editing process. And I think that is important for folks, and that like maybe you don't necessarily enjoy editing, but you do need to find parts of this application process that you enjoy. Like, or at least find parts of the application process where you feel like you're learning and getting something out of it, even if you don't get the award. Because if you can't like find any added value, sorry, I have a bunch of Slack messages coming through. If you can't find any of that added value in the process, then it's going to feel just really blah. It's not going to be enjoyable. And so I think for you, you mentioned like really editing is what was effective for you. And I think we all need to find some part of that process that you feel like is effective or is like contributing to your learning process, whatever that is, academically, professionally. Um, and then your tough question. Um, it sounds like to me, they are really trying to test, and this is kind of part of Fulbright, is the mutual exchange, the cultural exchange. And so really trying to test that cultural competence, cultural consciousness. Do you have the like language to explain culture to someone from a different culture? And that is an important part of Fulbright that we don't want people to miss, is like, yes, there's research opportunities, there's English teaching opportunities, but a huge part of this is the mutual exchange piece and being able to go abroad and act as like an ambassador or diplomat to your country.
Mhm.
And like that question, I think really gets at like, do you have the skills to explain this very cultured word?
Right.
And I think that is an interesting question, but it also really does, like, to your point, you have 20 minutes and it really gets at that.
Mhm.
So I think that that's important for students to realize. If you're interviewed, like, you need to be prepared to talk both about potentially your teaching experience and like your preparedness to navigate in a different culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When I was in Colombia, during several seminars, how do they refer to them? They said, they called them teaching, uh, anyway, like blocks of time where we would learn teaching skills basically
Right.
from the Fulbright folks or outside folks,
Mhm.
consultants sometimes. Anyway, they were trainings
Right.
essentially, and they did not talk about the cultural competence. And I do think the word is a bit of a misnomer, because is anyone really competent of a culture, and does like any sort of culture exist? I think we probably more likely we make the culture all the time, and we draw on a history, a legacy of something we call culture to continuously make that culture. And that's sort of the beauty, I think, of being in the classroom, because
Mhm.
when uh, when a student asks, what is the N word, you're really, that is a moment uh, of exchange, but it's also a moment of creation of meaning there. And so whatever comportment I bring to that moment, as a teacher and sort of breed representative from the US,
Right.
however I might be seen, um, it's heavy and it matters. Uh, but I think if you approach it with a certain lightness, seriousness, but lightness, just like approaching the interview, it's a recipe for success.
Yeah. And to your point, yeah, it is really contributing to that culture, and that you are now explaining to a whole classroom of children, um, like potentially what that word means, hopefully from like a historical context. So you're really adding like the context that is needed, that is not taught in American classrooms.
No.
So you really
Yeah.
are creating, that consciousness around American culture that is hopefully, that is needed and is hopefully positively impacting those kids. And yeah, I think that is wonderful, and I think that's such a great example too of like potential scenarios that definitely could happen while you're there, right?
Right.
um a lot
Absolutely.
of our like most popular songs have those words in them, and like you are there now to like explain. And I think that is, to your point, it means you are a representative of Reed and the US, and there is a lot of like weight on your shoulders in explaining that. But to your point, like doing it well means like it could have like resounding impacts.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Potentially. And just to note, the folks I was teaching, I was in a university, and so
Okay.
I was actually teaching students who are usually around between 16 and 22 years
Hmm.
old. And so these are students who have been exposed to American music, culture, for possibly, a decade already, growing up with different music and other elements of the U.S. Culture.
Yeah.
Sorry to use square quotes so much, but I've been trained by the anthropology department thoroughly.
No, but like that does really bleed into it of like kind of knowing your age range, like the group, and like,
Right. Right.
how transparent do I need to be in explaining, this word or something.
Right.
So that is really good to know. So my sixth question, what was your Fulbright experience like? Were there any unexpected outcomes or experiences that you had while you were there?
Yeah, so I had a really, really good time. I really felt like, above all, I learned very deeply about teaching, um, specifically about teaching English
Mhm.
and about the politics of teaching accent or not,
Mm.
right? We hear about like, for example, we hear about accent reduction classes or programs. This might not be very familiar to US-based folks, but throughout the Latin America, right, they have these accent reduction coaches. And so that became a very big topic in terms of teaching English, because you're just teaching English the entire time. Or I
Yeah.
was, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. No, I'm just like, so teaching them to not have an accent with English words. Like you're
Right.
trying to, interesting.
Which is right. It's just super interesting. I hadn't really thought about that too much before going there, but then you realize, oh, okay, folks are saying this word in this way, which is not how I usually hear it in
Mm-hmm.
America.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, it's hard to say. If, for example, I'm from California, and a lot of my friends growing up in California were Latino, because half of the California population is
Right.
Latino, I think, at the
Yeah.
moment. And so I heard that certain ways of pronouncing certain words, but in Colombia, if I heard a similar way of pronouncing a word, I was being asked to teach a specific pronunciation of a word. I'm kind of going on here, but the point being that I learned a lot about what it means to take English, because
Mm-hmm.
I think what I ended up realizing is there's no one English, even in
Yeah.
the U.S. And we say there's one English? Absolutely not, right? There's across
Yeah.
socioeconomic status and races and um, lots of other different indicators. There's so many different even Englishes, right? So what does it mean to teach English
Uh-huh.
became a very interesting question. The power dynamics associated with that. Yeah, but overall, super, super good experience. I really, I connected uh, on a deep level with some students, especially students who came to a sort of conversation club gathering that myself and a few other Fulbrighters organized weekly, which actually ended up turning into sort of a reading group. Us Fulbrighters, in conversation with the students, we realized we wanted to sort of read about what's happening in the world and then discuss it as sort of an exchange of viewpoints and of information. Um, and so that connection that I developed with a few students in that conversation group was really, really cool. Um, yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
I'm glad you've had such a great experience. And the pandemic really is like, obviously just sucks because I feel like it was so disruptive to so many of our Fulbrighters, but it sounds like while you were out there, you made the best of it. Um, and then what advice do you have to any, well, now rising seniors, or I guess like any of our graduating seniors or alumni who are still eligible to apply? What advice do you have for folks who may be considering applying to the award?
Sure. Um, I would say, folks considering the award, consider what you sort of consider what will be entailed in the award, but also consider how much you have to learn and gain from it. Um, it I think it doing a Fulbright both requires so much independence and also teaches you so much independence. So if you're somebody who doesn't feel like they are very independent, excellent opportunity to like get out there, go for it, and learn that independence in the world. And for someone who feels like, oh no, I'm already pretty independent, it's a good opportunity to stretch, test your boundaries, and that's with regards to social, intellectual, cultural independence. I don't know, just in general. I would say for folks considering the Fulbright, consider the time period. Like I said, I applied after I graduated Reed. Not only did that give me lots of time to work on the application, but I knew that I wanted to take a little bit of time off from higher education in general. And so I already was planning on um, doing doing woofing for about 6 months, which is working on organic farms. I was doing that in Oregon
Yeah.
for a while after I graduated. Just something for myself. I want to learn. I want to be outside and work with my hands.
Mhm.
So I decided to do that as I was preparing for the Fulbright, writing the essays, taking the interview, and then eventually preparing to leave.
Yeah.
Um, Other advice I'd give juniors and seniors is uh, this is I think this is pretty cliche, but a Fulbright can really change your life. It's 9 to 10 months in a different country. One of my another Fulbrighter, a friend that I was uh, often hanging out with in Colombia, she actually started dating one of the other Colombian professors in her English department at a different school.
Mhm.
And they're still together.
Yeah.
And actually, I think she lives there now. And this Fulbright, of course, was already a year ago, 2 years ago. No, a year ago. Anyway, it can really change your trajectory quite a bit.
Well, and you
And I
mentioned,
guess the last thing I would say is I had a couple people when I would tell them, oh, actually, I'm going to go to next year. I'm going to go to Columbia to teach English at a university. And I would have some people say, oh, you mean you're going on a vacation, wink, wink. And I had to kind of say, well, no, actually, I'm expected to teach
Mhm.
almost 35 hours per week. And with the lesson prep along with that, it really became a full-time job. So if you are looking for a vacation, don't apply to a Fulbright. It's not a vacation. It's a job where you will hopefully bring a lot to the table, but you will also learn a lot about yourself and uh, a lot about wherever you might end up.
Yeah, I think that is just perfect. And you mentioned, along the lines of trajectory, like you said you were saving up money so you could continue traveling, toward the end of your Fulbright. And I think that's another point that, like, you may get out there and you may not want to come back to the US. And you may continue to travel and find ways to be abroad. And I think Fulbright gives you, to your point, gives you that opportunity to, like, get out of the country, do a thing, earn some money, and see, what are your next steps for yourself. And I really love that you're encouraging folks, to stretch and push themselves outside their comfort zone, because that's very much what this is going to be. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
Just
yeah.
to that, what you just said, actually in Colombia, if anyone is thinking about Colombia, the Fulbright Colombia is somewhat unique in that uh, every year they have a cohort of so-called senior Fulbrighters, um, senior ETAs, they're called English Teaching Assistants, senior ETAs, who are English teaching assistants from the year before, Fulbrighter from the year before, who have decided to reapply. So you can actually, in Colombia, you can actually reapply to be a Fulbrighter, do a second year of essentially the same thing, maybe at a different university, most likely at a different university. And you also have other responsibilities, such as sort of welcoming and keeping tabs on the first year Fulbrighters. But that, for example, an English teaching assistantship in Colombia can turn into a 2-year stay in Colombia. I decided against that with the pandemic and other things, but it can really become a pretty extended thing.
That's awesome to know. I did not know that. So that is very cool.
I didn't know before going either.
Yeah. And I also think, though, it is a matter too of, like, networking for yourself. And, like, if you're really enjoying your Fulbright experience and that's something you want to continue to do, is stay out there, like working with the faculty or working with the Fulbright contact that's in your country, to continue identifying opportunities that folks may know of that you can apply to stay out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, just to know one more thing, after I did my Fulbright, I was told I could apply. It might have been an exception year, but I was told that I could apply to another Fulbright, not only in Colombia, but to a different country. I was thinking about possibly a European country, but decided against it to actually pursue my own language learning. Now
Yeah.
I'm learning French now.
Yeah.
In
We have a lot of people who go to the TAPIF program
okay,
when they didn't, we have folks who applied to both Fulbright and the TAPIF French English teaching program.
right, okay,
And students seem to be really successful with that too. So there's ways to like kind of potentially stack your English teaching abroad experience and stretch it out over 2 years. There's plenty of awards that give you the chance to do English teaching all over the place. Uh,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, and so I think that that's a really good point. Well, great. This was awesome. It's the end of my list of questions for you. Thank you so much.
No worries, no, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think what you're doing with the ex Fulbrighters is really helpful for the next cohort. I wish I had sort of someone to walk me along in the process, and so all of our perspectives, I think, together will
Yes.
prove to be pretty valuable, almost no matter where you apply.